Have you ever had anything that you really wanted to do, that was important to you, but you never just quite made it happen? Whether that was saving for a house, whether that was studying for a particular career, whether that was just spending more time with your friends. Of course, we all have. And sometimes the reasons that we're blocked, well, they're tangible, they're obvious, like not having the money to go back to school. And sometimes those obstacles, well, they're mental. They're in our minds, they're internal. They have to do with how our minds are wired. And I don't mean that in a strange Freudian sense about repressed memories or such. And I also don't mean it in the sense of having true intellectual disabilities. Rather, I mean it in the sense of how we are all wired as human beings to be slightly imperfect. Whether that is imperfect memory, imperfect attention, etc. So, I'm a behavioral scientist, and I study this gap between our intentions and our actions. And in particular, at Morningstar, we look at what stops people and what helps them get going again. We look at how people plan for the future, in particular, how they save and invest, and so often how we don't actually do that really well. Now, in addition, of course, I face the same obstacles as everybody else. And for me, it's often been getting regular exercise. So I went to the doctor a number of years ago. He said, look, you seem to be eating relatively well, but you clearly do not exercise, and you need to. So I was born skinny as a beanpole. But what that hides is that I've actually had musculoskeletal problems all my life because of lack of exercise. Especially back pain, but I've had pinched nerves in my neck and my hands, etc. And in fact, on the day that I was married, I was lying on the floor, the bathroom floor of the church, in my tuxedo, unable to move because of the pain in my back. Now, I've been out of commission for almost 3 weeks. But at that moment, my family, my friends, my wife-to-be Alexia, they were waiting for me. And so my best man, Paul, he pulled me up off the floor so I could go say my vows. So look, I've always known how important it is to exercise. It's not a problem with motivation. Look, there's nothing more motivating or scary than almost canceling your own wedding. I always intended to exercise. What I found through my research and through so many other behavioral scientists is that the reasons that we struggle to turn our intentions into action, well, they aren't always obvious, and neither are the solutions. They have to do with how our minds are wired, and they're not going to magically go away. And so we need a different solution than simply getting angry at ourselves. We need another approach. And so, to see how this approach works, I'm going to give you the example of exercise. It's something that I know many people struggle with, as I have myself. In the same way, the tangible obstacles that stop you from exercising, well, they're usually pretty obvious. You don't have the shoes, you don't have the clothes, you don't have gas in your car, etc. But the mental ones, they're different. Like that subtle lack of self-confidence that makes you never even try in the first place. And so, as behavioral scientists, we have a set of techniques to help people overcome these cognitive obstacles. Well, there are magic tricks, as it were. And so I'm going to share some of those with you today, but I want to do something that's actually far more important as well, which is tell you how we attack these problems so that you can find how to turn intention into action in your own life. And you can think about these in a different way. Now, the process starts by looking at a specific moment in time. So let's say you intended to go to the gym more often, and you're sitting on the couch watching TV, Netflix, whatever. And in that moment, why would you spontaneously get up and go to the gym? It's a funny question, right? So there are actually many different obstacles that could stop us in that moment. And I like to organize them and think about them with this leaky funnel: create, cue, reaction, evaluation, ability, timing, and experience. In that our intentions come in at the top, and then because of distraction, because of our emotions, because of so many things in our lives, our action sometimes doesn't make it all the way through the body. In fact, quite often doesn't. Now, this is a simplification of a broad literature in behavioral science, but I think it's a very useful one. So let me show you what it means. So when you're sitting there on the couch, watching TV, the most obvious reason why you don't get up and go to the gym is you're not thinking about it. You're thinking about the show. You're thinking about your dinner, etc. And so often the most important and the first cognitive obstacle we all face is simply limited attention. We can only focus on a few things at one time. And so what do you do about this? Now, when I work at Morningstar, we've done many experiments about simple, boring attention. We prompt people, for example, to think about their finances and think about their future. And what we find so often is what matters most isn't what we say, but rather when we say it. It's an experiment that I ran with one of the largest manufacturers in the US and their employees. And we were prompting people to think about their financial future. And we found that just by changing a few hours of when we prompted people, exact same message, we could double or triple follow through. Huge impacts. Now if you take a step back from that, you can think there are really two general ways that one can solve the attention problem. The first one is the ones that we usually go to, which is to force it. If you want to do something in the future, and you're not sure you'll be thinking about it, you set reminders, you set cues in your environment, you have your friends tell you, you try to force your attention to the issue. And that can work. But the other way is just find a time when you're less busy, when you're less scattered, when you have the mental bandwidth to do it. That's what this experiment is about. And so in my own life, I've done both. I found that in everyday life, I'm just too scattered, too busy, too focused on other things to think about exercising. But there's a time when I'm not, and that's Friday afternoon. So I go regularly, Friday at lunchtime. It's relaxed, think about it, and yet I also set a reminder in my calendar just in case, to make sure I remembered and didn't forget. And so once the mind starts thinking about a particular action, it will have an immediate and emotional intuitive reaction, what behavioral scientists call System 1 response. Now, if that response is negative, it says, oh, I won't do that, then you can discard the idea without even thinking it through. And so, what do we do about these strong negative emotional reactions that stop us sometimes? Well, one way is you can try and avoid that emotional response. So, for example, by going to the gym, there's a wonderful, convenient, right near my house gym, where let me tell you, those people are fit, they are well dressed, and they are into it. And that ain't me. I went there and it's like, this is not the place for me. Oh no. So I solved that like many other people do by getting equipment at home, which then I promptly never used. But more importantly, I found another gym where people just took it a whole lot less seriously. The costs and benefits, the long-term value of exercise, exactly the same, but I didn't have to see these overly fit people in their exercise uniforms every day. I could just go there, do my thing, leave. Nobody bothered me, they didn't judge me, I didn't judge them. That's avoiding the emotional response with the same core activity. Now there's another technique that you can use, which actually comes from research on public speakers. It's a great study in which researchers took beginning public speakers who were very anxious about going up and speaking. And they said, okay, think about what your body's feeling as excitement. Use that emotion, work with it, go with it. In other words, instead of trying to squash your emotion, welcome it and use it. Because look, as human beings, we have emotions and they ain't going away. And so instead, how can we use them? How can we harness those? Now, as we do start to consciously and deliberatively think through a particular action, as we think about the costs and benefits, sadly there are many things that can go awry. In the health context, we are particularly poor at analyzing the long-term mathematical probabilities of having a particular health outcome and what that means for whether you do a particular exercise, etc. We just don't do that. Another big challenge that we face is that as we think about this thing that's important to us in the long term, well, there's also all these other little things that we just want to do right now. And they just seem much more immediate. And so we have this tension between the long-term need and the short-term, well, if I just do that right now, that looks like fun. And so what do you do about this temptation to stray from your path? One technique is called temptation bundling, by Katie Milcom at Wharton and others, where they took people and said, okay, you can listen to this great audiobook, but only when you're exercising at the gym. And so they took a short-term desire, listen to the audiobook, paired it with a long-term desire, go out and exercise. And they found that together, that helped people do the latter. Now, another technique you can use is inspired by Greek mythology and Odysseus on the Mast. It's work by Nava Ashraf and others, in which Odysseus, as he was approaching the sirens, the mythical beast that lured sailors to their deaths with their songs, he knew that he would be tempted. And so he had his sailors tie his hands to the mast. In other words, in a moment of strength, realizing that he would be tempted, that he would stray from his path, he closed off his options. That's how we get the phrase, tie your hands. And so in your own life, when you know that you might not follow through on the things you want to do, how can you make it harder to stray? Now, those are just a few examples from behavioral science. The techniques we can use to help ourselves, to help others follow through from our intentions to our actions. And there are many others. The obstacles that are being addressed, for example, are our sense of inability, our lack of confidence that we have the ability to succeed at something. Our amazing ability to procrastinate, especially when something is not urgent or the timing doesn't feel right. And the undue focus that we put on our past experiences, especially when they're negative experiences, regardless of what the baseline or objective statistics tell us are the right things. But I want to take a step back from the individual obstacles we create from them, and from our techniques that we developed in behavioral science, and think about how you can do this yourself. In particular, what do each of these techniques have in common? One of them I already mentioned, which they focus on a specific moment of action. So often we have a narrative for our lives that says, oh, I don't do that because I'm so lazy. Okay, we're all lazy, fine. But instead, the reasons we don't do something are the compilations of many micro moments in which we fail to act. And the answer to those are in the micro moments, on that couch. Not in general, but on that couch, why didn't you move? Why didn't you get up? So we look at the specific moment, and then in that specific moment, we look at the specific obstacle. That's the create. Now, for my own life, that was in particular attention and a none too rational emotional reaction that I had. For you, in other contexts, it will be different. Now, the third part has to do with the nature of the solutions behaviorals come up with. They aren't fundamentally about changing human nature. They're instead about changing the context in which we act. Why is that? It's because when the obstacles are things that are in our minds, when there are procrastination, or inattention, or temptations, the things that make us human, that's not going to disappear. We can get better, yes, and we should and can work hard at that. But we're not magically going to have perfect memory. I'm sure as heck not going to. Instead, we look to the environment to see how can we make it easier to take action despite ourselves. Another way of thinking of it is this, that when the problem is internal, when it's just who we are as human beings, the solution is often external. It's outside of ourselves. It's not about getting angry at ourselves. It's not about wishing away our human nature and our limitations. And so I've given you a variety of examples that have to do with exercise, but I want to show how you can apply this logic in your own life, in other areas as well. So let's say that you want to spend more time with your family, with your friends, etc. But when you get home, you are just always checking your phone. I know I am, I know lots of other people do. You're looking at social media, you're looking at the news, you're looking at whatever. And you're just always distracted. Well, what do? Do you get angry at yourself? You say, God, why do I do this? Do you try to fight the temptation of the moment? It's a habit. It's very difficult to fight. No. You put the phone in a box when you walk in the door, so that when you're there with your friends, with your family, etc., you just don't have your phone with you. You don't see it. You don't have that habit of check. Ooh, something new. You break that cycle by changing your environment. Now, let's say you forget to take a pill, a medication that you need, for example. Do you just get angry at yourself? Or do you put the pill, you put that bottle right in front of the door so you can't open the door until you see it? In other words, you place a cue in your environment to help you do what you want to do. And we can think of many other behaviorally inspired life hacks, because that's what these are. They're life hacks. And if there are two lessons that I want to leave you through, it's this. Is that if we get back to the title of the talk, why do we sometimes fail to turn our intentions into action? It's because we're human. It's because we're people who procrastinate, who have limited willpower, have limited attention, etc. And that's never going to change. That doesn't mean that we are powerless. It doesn't mean that we can't do anything about it. Rather, it just means we have to look elsewhere. We have to look outside ourselves. We have to look at specific moments, at the specific obstacles in those moments, and how we can make it easier for ourselves at that point in time to take action. And so for myself, I thankfully have never had the terrible back pain that I had in the 3 weeks leading up to and during my wedding. And in large part, it's because of lessons from behavioral science that I've learned and been able to apply and exercise more regularly. I'm sure as heck not perfect, I'll tell you that. But it's better. And that matters. And so you can do the same. Not by getting angry at yourself for being human, but rather by looking at the specific moments, at the specific obstacles you face in those moments, and making it easier for yourself to turn your intentions into action. Thank you.